It's looking pretty slim in projects.
Earlier, but Colonel Busby brought us back. Thanks to him. All righty. This is the council's admin and policy committee meeting. And first up, our chief of police and
I make a motion to
Oh.
approve the minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. I'm trying to get ahead of myself. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Thank you very much. Now, Chief, speak to us.
Yes, sir. I'm actually gonna have LaShonda come up and do the primary on this, and I'll answer any questions you have.
All righty. She's the boss.
Ms. Abear.
Good afternoon, council. This is a request to upgrade our auxiliary police officer job classification. The officers are currently a 5, and we're asking to upgrade them to a 10.
All right now.
And some of the background behind this is sometimes when you fix a problem, you create a new problem. If y'all know, we are kind of dire need for SROs, auxiliary officers, and we changed it to make that job more attractive. We basically said, hey, look, you work the school schedule, you get the weekends, holidays, and summers off. And that did help, but the other problem that created was our officers that work municipal security are making the same money as the SRO officers, and they're off the entire summer, the week of 2 weeks of Christmas and all that, so we have to elevate one to make it an equal balance, basically.
Makes sense.
And we need to remember these officers at the school are our first line defense for the children. That's right.
I love it.
I do too. Okay, do we have a
There's only
motion?
6 of them.
I'll make a motion.
Questions or motion?
So thank you. Go ahead, vote. I said motion.
Motion, we have a motion. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's approved. Thank y'all. Thank y'all very much. And next is the proposed retention incentive for police and fire telecommunications.
LaShonda again.
Yes, sir. This is a request to grant a one-time retention incentive to all of our police and fire telecommunications non-sworn. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you guys can see that. It doesn't show. That one looks fine. Okay. Okay. For some reason, that one doesn't. So, we will pay, if you guys approve this, we would pay on January 27th, 2023, based on years of service through December 20th. If the employees have less than 5 years of service, they will receive $250, 5 to 9 years of service, $500, 10 to 14 years of service, $750, 15 to 19 years of service, $1,000, and then 20 or more years of service, $1,250. This money is budgeted. I don't know if you recall, but during the budget process, we did place money in the budget for retention and recruitment incentives. So that's where this funding would come from.
Okay.
And this would be a total of 33 employees that are in police and fire, telecommunications.
Any questions?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All right.
All in favor?
All in favor?
We're gonna roll today. Let's go.
All in
Aye.
favor, say aye. All right, that passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And one more.
One more.
Hey, you left me
So
ahead.
this
What-
is a request to upgrade or update section 19-51 of municipal code, the B portion. The B portion is in reference to telecommunications, police and fire, both, and actually, Captain Chronister has come in and has done an amazing job, with the telecommunications staff, and there are some changes that are coming. But in section 19-51, the B section, there is outdated language related to the progression of telecommunicators. So we're asking to delete that out of code.
We'll just have it, it'll read what we're doing, basically, I suspect.
So what it will read is there's a portion related to senior status that applies to all city employees. But normally in municipal code, we don't list progressions of positions. I'm not sure, it was years ago that was added, but we're asking to just delete
Just take
that.
that out.
And
Make
it'll
it-
be in the job description like
Okay.
most positions. Yes, sir.
Ms. Abear, I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. All in favor? It passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that brings us down to Council President Tyner.
Hey, I am Mr. Short-Term Rental.
I've heard other things said about you.
Yes, and I have heard them too. I've heard them too. Ashley, we'll just kind of, if you'll come up, we'll continue to just kind of go through our conversation today, if you will. And the reason why I had asked for this moratorium because I felt it was just getting way out of hand. As well, there were some other issues to me on the ZBA, feeling that everything had to be approved no matter what, which that should have, I felt like never should have been the case, which created a lot of problems, as well as the annual renewals when maybe those didn't have to, they were often unnecessary. So those are some of the things we wanted to discuss, and the main concerns that I got through all of this process was from mostly the R1 neighborhoods about absentee, more or less, they wanted home ownership because of what we were seeing, a pattern of just the houses in R1, R2 neighborhoods just strictly being used for short-term rentals only. And then they were absent, and then they were dark the rest of the year. So, so you go ahead, if you will, what you and I know you, Scott, have talked about it to address those concerns.
Well, I think I'll start and we're gonna hop in the Wayback Machine. I love some Wayback Machine, but we gotta hop all the way back to our discussion in October. And the directive that we as staff had was, hey, we're gonna get some feedback. We didn't get much.
Nope.
We didn't get much from the public. We didn't get much just generally. So in summary, what we had was we wanted to make it easier on staff and the ZBA, the process overall. We wanted to reprogram the ZBA that they actually could deny short-term rentals, and I think that will be happening just generally because you're getting, you've got one member that's coming back, but as a full-time member, and then 3 new members completely.
Right.
We heard that it could be owner occupied.
That's the word I was trying to say.
And Mr. Holmes and I continue to have very large concerns with restricting it to be owner occupied only because it has been ruled unconstitutional. And if we can talk a little bit more about that. I know Mr. Holmes has the court case and some others that have been challenged. And then we heard that they wanted it to be easier to reapply if there were no complaints. And so I think today what we need to do potentially, if there are to be changes to our current ordinance, I need consensus. I need to know what we should be changing, how to change it, or what I need to do, because I can write anything. And I've played around with some things. But this is not, we have a model ordinance. We have one that other communities call us and ask about. And the fact that for so long, there had been a few comments made at public meetings that they couldn't deny a short-term rental. Well, that wasn't true. There was always that ability. There is that ability still. They can deny short-term rentals when they come forward. So, if you would like to see changes, I can write it. I've written it probably. I just need to know what direction to go in.
Well, that's why I told you this morning. And I believe one of the biggest problems was the fact that they were told to you and to me and everybody, we can't deny. And that is just simply not the case.
It was never the case.
Or
Yeah.
should not. I mean, there's nothing we would write that you can't deny. I mean, this council votes against, things all the time. I guess my number one, I'll brag on Kim because she takes care of her properties, and people know that if there's problems, they know they've got somebody local they can call. Mm-hmm. the concerns that I had, most of all about owner occupied, is that I don't want to get in a situation where, because if one of the good things of owner occupied is work well in the Academy Drive area, for example, those people come back and live there. So if there's problems, they got their neighbors they've got to answer to.
Right.
So what do you say to the people, and I'll say in the Highlands, in the Downs, in Arcadia, that have been pretty prominent about how can they feel protected?
Yeah, the zoning board of adjustment has always had the ability, I gotta flip to where that portion or what it says, they've always had that ability to consider whether or not the property is permanently occupied and leased in its entirety to one party for periods of not less than 30 consecutive nights. And you say, Kreitz, what are you saying? That's lawyer speak and zoning ordinance speak to just basically say, hey, is this property fully occupied? Like, does someone live there full time? Is this someone's leased residence? Is this someone's owned residence? And that gave the board the ability to consider. It also today has the ability to consider the characteristics of the neighborhood and surrounding properties. And so those two items have always been there. I just think we ran into some instances where you had, and I make it a very strong practice to encourage my board members to hear what the code says. As the zoning board of adjustment, the code always gave them the ability to deny short-term rentals. And so when things were said on record of, well, we can't deny, that wasn't true.
And when you and I spoke this morning, you gave me two examples of ways that I think would be of comfort to neighborhoods as far as maybe it's, Cassius knows this better than anyone, because we just talked about how difficult it is to get a speed table. Because you gotta have 60% of the neighborhood, or 70, approving before we will even consider a speed table. So, to me, it's even more important that neighbors feel protected when someone rents some for their house and they have no idea who it is. And I understand that. I mean, because I think, are all for neighborhood protection. These are neighborhoods are what make our city so great.
Yeah.
So I just don't like the fact of, and Scott, I know, about the owner occupied, that I know some cities do it.
Well, and I want to get in Ashley's Wayback Machine also.
Okay.
We can go back to when we were working on this and I had hair. One of the things, because I've been the prime lawyer that's dealt with this even before I was in my current position, and owner occupied has been something that has come up from day one.
Right.
And from day one, I've said I have concern that is unconstitutional, and that we're going to end up getting challenged on that. And so throughout the course of this coming up, we've had, and listen, this is not unusual in my position to have but this city does it like this. Oftentimes that's because different cities of a different class, they're in a different state with different laws. The big example that we got was New Orleans. City of New Orleans did that. The city of New Orleans just finished spending probably several $1 million being sued. And fortunately for me, timing-wise, this time when it comes back up, rather than having to come and say, I feel like that's unconstitutional and will be challenged, I can come and say that the United States Appellate Court for the Fifth Circuit has said making it homeowner occupied determination is unconstitutional. Now, one of the things that the court says, they said that's too big of a burden. But I want to look back at what we did, because this is something we thought of as we designed the current ordinance we had. You just heard what Ms. Kreitz said from the zoning code, whether or not you can consider whether or not whether or not that house is used as a residence, whether or not it's occupied full-time versus being used only as a short-term rental. And again, this is where we're going to lean on zoning. What does zoning do? Zoning talks about how you use the piece of property. It doesn't talk about who owns it. It doesn't talk about ownership rights. It is how is this property being used. One of the safeguards we put in was the nightly cap. The idea behind that was that we wanted to make it economically unfeasible. it may be economically feasible for you to have a house and rent it out periodically, but if you can only rent out a house for 30 or 45 days, you're not going to go buy a $500,000 house. Even with the good rates you can get at STR, it economically doesn't make sense. And the other is the keeping of the neighborhood. As we've talked about with the initial establishment of the tourist overlay district, there are areas of our town that have a higher, in neighborhoods and pockets that have a higher intensity of use. Where Mr. Busby may or may not notice a couple new people walking down his street.
Yeah.
A couple new people walk down my street, and everybody would be out of their minds.
I noticed.
But there are areas of town that have a higher intensity of use. And so those were sort of the things that we designed in, saying we don't think we can do this, but we think these are legal remedies to help address those problems. And I think largely it's worked really well.
Well, no,
I think largely it's worked very well.
I disagree in that I've had a heck of a horrible year with neighborhoods in my district that have not been happy. And, we had one the law was called to, we had arrest made, in one neighborhood.
Was that a licensed short-term rental?
They denied, they were operating without.
Okay.
And then they were denied because of having that record. And then we had one in Arcadia that had some violations, but they went ahead and approved them anyway. Because they had done one weekend without a license, and then they gave it to them anyway. So I'm not being ugly. It's just the fact that I just want to have the most, I don't want a house to sit there and just be a short-term rental house. That's all I'm trying to avoid.
That's fair.
Mr. Busby, I think, wants to say something.
Yeah, I will. I think what we have in place is substantially right. And I did not think that on the front end. I thought this was going to be the end of peaceful community living, and it has not proved that way. I personally think owner-occupied solves most of the problems we deal with, but I think it is probably illegal. I think the speed bump is probably not an accurate analogy because that's public property that we're putting an impediment in. It's a much dicier thing to tell people what they can do with their private property, and only to the extent that it infringes on the rest of us is it even considerable. I did not offer any comments into it because I did not have that many. I have the largest concentration of those properties, and it has not been the problem that I thought it would be. The input I would have is, whatever we do, let's structure it to leave alone those people who are not being problems, and to hammer those people who are. So, if anything, a clause that would allow an easier revocation of a business license if somebody is being a repeat problem would be good. Thanks. And again, it's substantially right, I think.
Well, in situations, and I appreciate what Councilor Busby, but it's almost like a tale of two cities. Yours has not been yours has not been what I've experienced.
It's the difference in the council.
Yeah, it is. And because you've got, you're mostly university, so you can expect the short-term rental. We got established neighborhoods like I've got that are strictly neighborhoods, mostly all ownership. It has created problems and it's created fears.
Well, and I'm curious if what is technically about to be a new zoning board of adjustment.
That's the thing that gives me a saving grace on the whole thing, because I don't think we need a major revamp either. It's just the fact that when you're going 3 and 4 hours at ZBA meetings because of all the increase in people, and I've seen it and I've got texts that said, well, I need the extra money. You know, well, I'm doing this for the extra money. Well, so what? That doesn't mean you go into a neighborhood like the Downs or like the Highlands just because you want to make extra money. Well, I think we all would like to make extra money, but to what expense do we allow to upset an entire neighborhood?
Mr. Lanier, did you have something?
Yeah, under the current policy, if you already have an Airbnb, you have to redo your license. Do you have to go back before ZBA?
So the way the zoning board has been approving these licenses is a year probation. They've been granting a probationary first year with 30 nights, and then they have to come back in that second year to renew their approval. And at that point, the zoning board is giving them the 3 years allowed by code. And, you know, we can still revoke a license just like we would any business license if you have a bad actor. You have someone who's just consistently a problem in a neighborhood, it's a business license like any other that could be revoked.
So Councilor Neer, like Ms. Roberts, who's got how many properties? 84. She probably wouldn't have to come back every year, you know, because now, right now, she's had to come back for every property every year, and I think maybe
Well, that's
this
what I was trying to say.
eliminate that, right?
I do
Right
think
on
the
them, but other
probation
than that, I
period-
have no issue with the current policy.
Probation is great, but once they start, but if they have to come back if they've had actually complaints.
That- and
It's
that
almost
could-
always the case, it's like bars.
Yeah.
We know within a year
Whether
if
they're
it's
gonna be a problem.
or not.
There's no question about that.
So as we're trying to gain some level of consensus of whether or not we, number one, even want to make any changes to our current ordinance. Because I think we need to know that before I start making suggestions, because y'all know me, I mean, I'll throw stuff at a wall and see what sticks, but I don't want to throw things at a wall if I don't have to.
Let me just say this, I would like to see it so that they don't have to, like we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
if they've had a clean record,
Okay,
they don't have to come back every year. When that's one of the things that bottles up ZBA,
you're right.
is all the repeat ones. And the fact that they just know, unlike the last ZBA, that they can be denied. And I can still wake up in horror, my nightmares about saying, this can't be denied, none of them can. That's just not true.
I had a conversation with one on the board, and what he just said is what that person at least would like, that if they're already approved,
No
they
issues.
haven't had a problem.
Love that.
Just rubber stamp it,
I
go
do too.
through and keep
Rubber
them
stamp it,
having
but
to-
it's still a
I've heard
stop
something,
point
so
where they
just-
can say, you know
Whoa,
what, you're a
yeah.
problem.
At any time.
Yeah, at any time,
I
sure.
don't care
But
if they
I
come
didn't,
in or
I
not.
guess you said something about if you make a probationary period, it's 3 years.
Look, Kim, I'm gonna give Kim a parking
I mean, to
place
me,
right here so she can.
After that
To
first
make
year.
it better, but I mean, it's almost like, why would you not, I mean,
We
I
know.
just want to throw this, why would you not just roll it a year at a time?
That's, I think,
I mean, if you roll it a
exactly.
year at a time and if you have no issues, it's gonna roll another year. There's not, I mean, and I think if someone has a problem, then drag them back for
Yeah.
ZBA.
We
But
could
until
write
they
in
do,
an
that would
audit.
streamline everything.
Yep.
And then to Kip's point about the ZBA board, I think if you sit and you talk to them about this, the neighborhoods have a lot more power in this than they think if it can be denied.
Well, I think
If ZBA can deny, and people have concerns, then make the person that wants to rent the house, that's not owner occupied or whatever, make them say, this is what I'm doing, and make it, I don't wanna say make it hard for them, that's the wrong way to say that, but just make them have to come and make a case that this is what we're gonna do. That will allay a lot of the fears of the neighborhood.
I agree.
If you do that,
So-
hold them accountable.
Okay.
So let me ask you, so if we don't have a real problem, if our current policy serve as a model for other cities to say, hey, we should follow this, no matter, we got a couple neighborhoods complaining, I get it, I don't really have that issue, but, I mean, should we change our entire policy or?
That's not what we're doing. That's not what I'm even asking.
I'm just saying, like, so, I just wanna make sure that we don't, if it's not broke, I don't wanna fix it. You
Well-
see what I'm saying?
Well,
Give back to it.
well,
If
Cassius,
it's-
everybody needs to be, anything comes for us, you need to be able to say, this can be voted down.
Oh, yeah, sure, I understand that,
That's
I'm
why
fine,
it's
I'm
open.
fine with that, but I'm saying that, I don't think that's excluded in this current policy though, right?
No,
It's an education issue.
but it has
It's
been. And I think it's
a
good now
willingness
that-
to be educated issue.
Right.
Can I
Staff
ask-
has educated.
Can I ask the committee and certainly input from other council members present, from a process standpoint, I believe making everybody that currently goes to ZBA, go to ZBA, but if there are no documented issues, not making them come back to ZBA for a renewal.
Yeah, I like
If-
that for
if
sure.
we can, I think we can draft that very easily.
Yeah.
We would take that to planning commission to approve.
Yeah.
At what level would this committee or this council want to review that again before it ends up on a full council agenda?
I mean, well, we heard it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all agree on the same thing.
Yeah,
I don't want people having to come up here.
So
if
we're
we-
thinking about it from a timing perspective.
That'd be a year at a time, or 3 years?
No, it would just be, it would roll. We'd remove that 3-year maximum and just let it keep rolling.
Every year until there's an issue.
You'd audit until there's an issue.
But also, what do you do about a house that's just being used strictly for short-term rental?
So, and I think that's one of those questions we've got to ask right now is if we are making a proposed change and we are trying to keep it as minor as possible, you could add in something about whether or not short-term rental is a primary or an accessory use. I think that skirts the concept of owner-occupied without getting into legal issue. You let the zoning board consider whether or not it's that primary, whether the home has been established as only short-term rental or whether you're living in it and renting it out every so often.
Let me add this into the conversation, because again, my neighborhood experiences, I'm more interested in the 30-day limit, 45 with special permission. Because I've got homes in my district that are beautiful, but they're only used a little bit because people from out of state, they keep them up immaculately.
Right.
There's no problems with them. The lawns are perfect. I don't want to penalize those people.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was
I
a
Can I ask a question?
no charge.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, so I hear what Kip's talking about, but it also just doesn't happen. And my concern when you are saying that you're going to instruct the ZBA to be harder on people who don't live in their home. I've been to all these ZBA meetings and I've seen neighborhoods stampede up there that don't want it in their neighborhood, and the ZBA told them, we're gonna give them a year, and if there's problems, come back and let us know. And they don't come back because there's no problems.
Yeah.
And they think they're going to have problems, and then there's no problems. Is it fair to penalize a homeowner because you've got a angry mob coming down that thinks that they're gonna have all these problems that really don't exist?
Yeah. Well, I just want them to be clear that they can say no. That's all I'm
But
just
my
saying.
concern is where is it, who are they gonna
Well,
say
it
no
has to be
to?
case by case. I mean, each case would be
Right,
separate.
okay.
'Cause you can't
But are we
blanket
gonna-
it. I mean, this guy right here, I know he's gonna do a good
Oh, yeah, I
job.
know, yeah,
You know,
but I'm just thinking,
but again, we've had,
I know.
I've had some bad,
None of mine.
very bad, unscrupulous people who,
Well, I'm thinking of some specific ones that I attended, that I spoke on behalf of the owner that was wanting to do it, that there were a lot of angry neighbors that didn't want it. And the ZBA said, all you gotta do is call Kim if there's a problem, call 311 if there's a problem. They never had to do that. They didn't have to call 311, they didn't have to call me. They envision problems that don't exist. And I just don't wanna see someone penalized that doesn't get the opportunity, at least for a year, to prove those neighbors wrong.
And you
So-
don't wanna discourage private investment. There's gotta be
No. And the other thing I was gonna ask about,
because it has really done positive things for our city.
for
overall,
most
it's
of
never
our
happened.
houses, especially
How do
these
you-
ones that are not in the tourist
How do you-
overlay district, we have a desperate need in this town for extended stay properties where people don't have to have a 12-month lease. And we rent our houses out constantly off-season. They are full of groups of people coming here to work for the city, that are working on construction projects, laying fiber optics, doing this, doing that are booking these houses for 3, 4, 5 months at a time, off season. So a lot of them are not sitting there empty.
Well,
they're habitated.
And I will say, I'm not being boastful, but we wouldn't have short-term rentals if it hadn't been for me. Because I fought hard for it, and and that's why I feel like that at the same time, we need to put the brakes on a little bit and just look back at seeing, because we were having, gosh, I got so many texts you wouldn't believe, when people saying, I need this extra money. Well, I'm sorry, that's not my problem.
Richard,
we
need to be aware and be careful with this ZBA. They are seeing way too many cases. I mean, as y'all just saw, we had a very hard time getting qualified applications. We need to be careful just putting stuff on their agenda and letting everybody show up with pitchforks. The calls and the complaints are from the fact that we put a sign in the middle of a neighborhood that says, the world's about to change, you better stop it. That's where the complaints are.
Yes.
We're not getting complaints over the short-term renters. It's the process. I hate to say it, that the public process is the problem. I'm not trying to eliminate that, but we need to be very careful with it, because we need that zoning board of adjustments for a whole lot more than just short-term rental, and we gotta keep from burning them up.
But as you know from the Lakes meeting, when you don't give the stakeholders a chance for input, you end up redoing it. So I hear you on those big ugly signs saying the world's about to end, but we got to give those folks a say so.
But you have to do that.
A chance.
But I think with some amount of time, we have proven that most, I'm not saying all, most of the concerns are unfounded.
Most of them are.
I mean, I don't think any short-term
But
renter
they
says,
don't-
let's load up the sex offenders and
But
bring
they
them into
still-
the neighborhoods. I mean, that's what you would think if you went to these meetings.
But they still exist.
But to the opposite side of somebody that manages 400 long-term rentals, they don't know who I'm putting in their neighborhood any more than they do who Ms. Roberts is putting in their
You're
neighborhood.
putting it on an equal level.
I mean,
And mine go away in 2 days, yours are there for a
and
whole
you gotta
year.
go through the courts to get rid of my tenant.
Yeah.
Chief can go set her tenant out.
Yeah.
My
I
tenant,
agree
you gotta
with
go to
that
the
sign
court.
issue, because it terrifies people. The phone calls I get from people in the process that call me, because they're terrified, because that huge sign has gone up saying that we're getting ready to change your zoning.
Oh, I get them.
And we're not changing their zoning.
But I still think we
You
have.
know,
Okay,
It's a huge issue.
Thank you. So do we have a consensus that we'd like to streamline the process and have Ms. Kreitz write something up for that?
Yeah.
I can do that. I'm gonna ask a question I'm about to regret, I think, but I'm asking it anyway. And Scott's just gonna run. Do you want to see, so within the tourist overlay district, so that area bounded by the river McFarland, 15th Street, and Nick's Kids Avenue, tourist overlay district, we allow condominiums and apartments to apply for short-term rental by right. We do not allow, so think about, you've got Houndstooth condominiums inside the tourist overlay district. They can just come in and get a license. Midtown Village has to go to the zoning board of adjustment. Within the tourist overlay district, we allow for caps. We have a license cap we have not hit yet for multifamily and apartments. Or in condos. Would you like to see something similar outside of the tourist overlay district, where if they're in a condo or an apartment, they can come get a license? Because that requires the HOA to sign off on that in the first place. Or not the HOA, I'm sorry, the condominium association, to do that. Okay, no appetite, that's fine.
I don't think much of my district is outside the tourist.
No, yours is completely in.
I wouldn't do
So-
it.
I don't have a problem. It seems like if it's good for the
It would
one
make it
district,
easier.
it ought to be for the
Yeah,
other
it
one.
would, that would definitely take off a few cases here and there from the zoning board of adjustment.
We have both
That
ends
wouldn't
of my
bother
district.
me.
Anything to make it lighter.
Yeah, it'll make it lighter. Okay, so what I hear from you, got my listening ears on, is we are going to streamline the zoning board of adjustment process, still requiring them to come to the ZBA initially, But if there are no violations, complaints that have been verified, I think we need to use a verified situation
Right.
outside of just Betty Sue calling in mad because she thinks something's going on.
Very true.
You know, if Chief and his folks have been out there, I think that should be what's part of that audit.
I call him regular.
We are not going to make changes to the historic districts. That piece of it's working. And then what we can also do is find a quick way to make it easier to revoke a business license and maybe build in something for the Zoning Board of Adjustment to just help with clarity as we continue to train them as staff. If I heard all of that correctly, what I will do is whip up a red line version of a text amendment, and we will bring that to you January 17th as your admin committee meeting. If you are okay with it, what we will also do is advertise that the Planning and Zoning Commission is going to consider these text amendments on January 18th. They meet that Wednesday since we're closed for Martin Luther King Jr. Day on that Monday. So their meeting is moved to Wednesday the 18th. So you would hear it on the 17th. The Planning and Zoning Commission could hear it on the 18th. And then if there are no substantive changes, we can swing it right back to the full council after you are able to consider it on January 17th.
We could have it back on full council on the 24th.
That sounds good to me. Committee, how y'all
Me
okay?
too.
Anybody comment?
Consent,
I
a
would-
Christmas miracle.
I would suggest you whip that up.
Oh, it's whipped up, man.
I figured it is.
So what about it in the morning?
We have one question.
That's up to y'all.
So what about ending the moratorium for those of us in?
How do we need to do that?
That's up to y'all.
I think
Do we have
I was asking Scott.
the timing of doing this, if we hit the dates that Ms. Kreitz just listed, the timing of doing this, any new ZBA applications would be subject to these rules at the February ZBA meeting. And so the moratorium could be allowed to expire on January 31st, which is.
Why is the moratorium tied to these changes?
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same
Why
question.
can't we just end it?
Kill it now.
Could we not?
All we gotta do
vote
is make a
tonight
motion, second, vote.
and end it, and then make a change?
That is purely something for
It's
you as
up
a
to you.
council to
You okay with
consider.
I don't care.
What's that?
Okay.
You
Can we put something on the agenda tonight, Scott?
I mean, I could,
We're gonna
I'd have to draft something.
Can you whoop something up?
I can do that behind
Suspend
my-
the rules anyway, so.
Is the committee and the council agreeable to go ahead and drop the moratorium for now?
Yes,
And then
sir.
change it when the
Yes,
time
sir.
comes?
I never thought
sir.
it would go past December anyway.
That's what I thought. So, can we have that as a motion from the committee?
I make a motion.
Have a second?
Can I vote on this one?
Not right now. Okay, we have a motion, a second, committee, all in favor, aye. All right, Mr. Holmes, we expect that.
I'm not on this thing.
And, anything else anyone would like to bring before this committee?
A motion to
I hope I
dismiss.
never have a short-term rental in my district.
Well, you will.
Good luck to Billy too much. Yeah,
I'll second.
What's the motion?
to dismiss.
Oh, okay, all in favor?
Adjourn.
Aye.
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 All right.